What was your thank God I looked at the contract moment? Story 1. I was buying my first apartment. The ad said $350,000 for 3 bedrooms and free body corporate for a year. Call the guy and he says it's actually 2 bedrooms and a study, and they'd get me to come to his office instead of seeing the place. I insist on seeing the apartment, show up with my father next week. It's 1 bedroom. The study wasn't its own room, but a piece of a particle board he glued to the wall. Every time I asked where the remaining bedroom was, he dodged the question. It was actually $100,000 more than he said it was, and my father got him to admit that the body corporate wouldn't be free either. The entire thing was a con job, built to trick first home buyers into purchasing overpriced new apartments because the developers couldn't sell them normally and needed to at least make their money back. Last I checked, they're still trying to sell them 2 years later and haven't changed the incorrect ads. It was a pretty obvious con, but we don't get a lot of actual, I'm going to screw up your entire life on purpose con artists around here. Story 2. When we put a $20,000 deposit on a house. When we went to meet with the kitchen subcontractor to pick our appliances, he told us he couldn't order them until he got paid by the contractor for back money owed. Turns out the contractor couldn't pay his bills. When I went to the real estate agency that we bought through, looking for my deposit back, they told me the contractor had the cash. There was nothing I could do. I was not happy. So I started digging a bit and watching the house in the listings. Within a week, they had another deposit on the house. What I learned from my digging was this. It's extremely illegal to take and hold 2 deposits on the same property. Armed with this knowledge, I paid another visit to the real estate agency and told them they just violated the law, and their choice was get me my money or deal with the cops and every legal agency involved in real estate regulations in the state. Had my money back 2 days later, but only after telling the contractor no to a personal check. Story 3. I'm a professional actor. Last summer, I auditioned for the local Ren Fair, not realizing that it wasn't a paid gig. Found out a week into the rehearsal process. Oh well, I thought to myself, I agreed to this. I should have done better research. So about a month and a half later, the contracts came out. They're standard stuff for the most part. We won't hold the fair accountable if we get injured. We acknowledge we represent the company and thus won't do X, Y, and Z on professional things during fair hours, etc., etc. But buried in the middle of the contract is a non-compete clause, which basically forbade the signer from working for any other Ren Fair or Halloween event within 100 miles for a full year. The other folks at the fair were a lot less concerned about it, but I was absolutely not okay with that. They weren't paying me, and I wasn't going to sign off to not make money in a part of the industry for a solid year. I bailed basically as soon as the contracts were given to us. Story 4. Was supposed to be renting to own a house. It needed quite a bit of work, and was quite frankly disgusting and borderline uninhabitable before we moved in. Literally filled to my chest with stuff throughout the entire house. I'm 5'4". It was agreed we would pay the remainder of the note on the house, about $20,000, for a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath on 2 acres. Lived there about 3 months before they even drew up the contract with their lawyer, and cleaned out most of the rooms and burned probably 100 bags of trash they had throughout the yards. They show up at my job at 9 at night and want me to sign it right there. Basically, I told them I needed time to read it, and I'd get back with them the next day. Get home and go over this contract with my husband, and it is literally just something basic printed off the internet. Nothing filled in, and it said that at the end of the contract, the house went back to them. I don't freaking think so. Story 5. Back when Solar City was at peak popularity, we talked with a representative about their rooftop solar plan, essentially rent to own over 20, 30 years, don't recall now, and SC collects the government rebate check. It's exciting to be part of the future and all that, but I was concerned about the long-term ramifications. Example, if you want to sell your house later, the prospective buyer has to agree to take on the solar contract. Yeah, like selling a house isn't already a hassle, right? But then I looked into the paperwork as to exactly how much Solar City would be charging for electricity, pulled a utility bill from our electric company, and was stunned to find that SC electricity cost more. What? I confronted the rep, asked why on earth would we want to install solar panels only to pay more for our electricity. He had no answer, and I showed him the door. So glad I didn't follow a lot of my neighbors into that stinker of a deal. Story 6. It wasn't really something I caught so much as something I lucked out on. A coworker of mine went through a breakup and needed a roomie. He lived in a one-bedroom, so I slept on the sofa for a month until the lease was up. We signed a new lease for a 2-bedroom and moved. The monthly amount seemed cheaper than what I had expected. I double-checked the amount versus what was listed on their website, and we were paying about $200 less a month than what we were supposed to. We paid the first month's rent, and I got a call from the landlord asking us to come to her office. She had a new lease drawn up and asked us to sign it since she put the wrong amount down. I looked at my roomie, looked at her, and said, "No, ma'am, I think we'll stick with our current lease." She looked shocked, but she didn't try to force the matter. I love that cheap apartment. Story 7. Was starting a new job and expected a pretty straightforward contract of employment. However, I knew that with these things, I have to read it with a fine-tooth comb. Now for context, most jobs in the UK, where I am, offer 25 days of annual leave per year. My contract, however, said just 20. As I'd never had a job that didn't offer 25 days, I pushed back on it by asking if this was legal, not to my new employer, but to the recruiter. Got a response back 10 minutes later that the company's offering me a 25-day holiday, and I took it. Sometime later, when I'm at this new firm, I was discussing holidays with another guy who joined roughly the same time as me, and he only had 20 days of holiday, despite us being at a very similar level in terms of seniority and experience. He was kicking himself for not pushing back on this point. I wish this was the norm in the US. Story 8. The realtor we chose to help us purchase a home, who is a family friend, wrote up the initial paperwork for the deal on the house. I read through everything, since I worked with a lot of legal documents in my job at the time. There was a clause that the seller and her realtor had added that basically said something along the lines of accepting the house in as-is condition after however many days has expired without them hearing from us and our realtor. I kept bringing this up to our realtor that we needed to respond, and he assured me everything would be fine. Then, at the last minute before the deal would have gone through as is, he realized I was in fact right and we needed to hurry back with a response with our requests. I was so annoyed, and honestly, it all devolved from there. Should have been an indication to me how much of a pain this transaction was going to be. Story 9. I went to sign up at Snap Fitness, and it said they'd charge a $50 gym enhancement fee every year. They said it would go to equipment upgrades. I told them that's what my monthly fees should be going to. They refused to remove the fee, so I bailed and went to Anytime Fitness. They immediately proceeded to pull the same crap, plus the key fob to get in was going to cost me $70. You can buy a pack of 100 of them for like $20 on Amazon. They too refused to budge, so I backed out. Eventually I moved to an apartment with an on-site gym, so that worked out for the better. My current gym does that maintenance fee twice a year, but each time we all get to vote on what we want, and they purchase it with that fee. So at least the people are getting some say. Story 10. Joined the Army National Guard right out of high school and was eligible for a $20K bonus lump sum for the job picked, as it was stated in my contract. Recruiter told me that wasn't the case. I would receive the first half after completing all initial entry training and the other after 3 years of service. I double-checked and verified and brought the sum biatch to him. To his surprise, he didn't believe anyone, an 18-year-old, would read their contracts. Also, these bonus rules change all the time. Being a little biased as I came from the recruiting and retention community, I can say he may simply have missed that particular bonus message that went out. Regardless, the recruiters have nothing to do with paying out anything, and as long as it was in your contract, your admin section would process it out to you. Story 11. My wife and I were 3 days away from signing paperwork to buy a condo, and they sent us the latest, and we noticed that they changed the interest rate by a tiny amount, like 0.2%. They said the change was because they ran our credit, so they altered the interest to reflect our current credit rating. That left a bad taste in our mouth, so we said no thanks and walked away. The next week, my company got bought out and they moved us out of state. If we would have signed, we would have had to either immediately sell or quit my job. That's called a floating rate. You are pre-approved for a mortgage at a certain rate, but it's not locked in until you actually get the mortgage. Story 12. Spectrum, like most big telecom, sent me an email saying that they're increasing my bill by $10 per month. When I called in, they tried to convince me I was on a promotional period, which I was not since I was already a customer of 3 years, and read to them my bill and customer agreement with dates. After explaining to them that they are indeed lying to me and being transferred around to 3 people within cancellations, they miraculously found a way to reduce my bill by $15 going forward. Even though they backed down, it makes me sad to think about those who aren't apt enough, like my grandparents, to notice these money grabs and how much money these companies make by pulling this crap. Story 13. Was about to rent an apartment. The contract read fairly normal on the first 5 pages, so I just started skimming the paragraphs when I got stuck on the word elevator. The building doesn't have one. Turns out they included a clause granting permission to retrofit an elevator on the outside of the building, waiving my right for noise complaints, agreeing to have my rent increased by 12.5%, 8 apartments in the building, 4 floors, from the day the construction starts, plus the same share of communal electricity to cover cost of operation. Oh, and that having the elevator increases the property value, and thereby my baseline rent would go up by 5% annually as defaults. Noped the F out of there really quick. Story 14. Was looking around at animal shelters for a dog 2 years ago. One shelter's application for adoption stated it was a legally binding contract that said the shelter would be listed first on the animal's microchip. If we ever needed to rehome the dog for any reason, we'd return it to the shelter. We'd inform the shelter within 10 days of moving, and we give permission for law enforcement to enter our home to retrieve the dog if the shelter feels it necessary. Violation of any of these conditions was grounds for them taking the dog back. We went to the Humane Society across town, where the vetting process goes, got an ID, money for adoption, here's your dog. Story 15. I came back from studying abroad for my last semester of uni, and my roommate told me I had to go to the office and sign to get out of the lease. I went and asked them about the paperwork, took a quick glance, and asked, "Wait, this is to sign out of the lease?" "No, ma'am, this is to sign for another year." I left and asked if my roommate knew she was signing on another year. Thank God I asked, because now she's stuck in another year in the apartment with no one to share the lease. How can you sign a piece of paper without reading what you're signing for? Story 16. They listed both me and my husband on the loan for my house, but put the title only in his name. No one but a notary showed up at the signing of our house. He wanted us to quickly sign and move on. I read everything, which took hours. When I found that problem, the notary said that he was sure it was okay, and people would assume that I own half the house because I was on the loan. I didn't listen to him and insisted on being listed on the title. I trust my husband, but if I'm paying for a house, my name better be on the title. Story 17. I was applying for an apprenticeship at a large church that involved controlling the lighting and sound systems. Seemed all good, nice pay, and even transport benefits. When I started to apply, I got the full copy of the terms, and it read, "Applicant must be a member of Church of England and baptized as such." Now, I'm all for religious freedom, but I wasn't going to convert for an audio and lighting job. It didn't even make sense to me that just because you're working on a church's lighting and audio, that you have to be the same religion as your workplace. Noped out of that application pretty fast. Story 18. 2 years ago, I went to get a new phone and a plan that required a contract. The guy was like, "Hey, this plan comes with a free tablet. You just need to add the data coverage for it." I thought, awesome, free stuff. Then excused myself to look at the tablet in question. They were selling them for $100 without the plan. I came back and asked how much the coverage was per month, $10 per month for a year. Then I could drop the coverage with no penalty. Nope the frick out of that deal. Data coverage was just for 1 gig per month. Story 19. Seppuku Girl's model contract. My ex was offered to come on board, not just as a hopeful, but a model. Read the contract and said, frick no. They only pay 1 model daily based on album of the day, a measly few hundred last I recall. They force nudity, non-nude isn't good enough. The last part says, we reserve the right to use your photos with technology that has not been invented yet. Awful company. Legit sell your soul. Nope. Reminds me of that Seppuku Girl AMA. What a disaster that was, because people called them out on BS just like this. Story 20. A friend of mine was approached by a law firm who was representing a woman that was suing a former executive for harassment, and they wanted him to join the case as he had made his past dealings of being harassed and abused by this executive fairly public. Thank goodness he had someone review the contract. It basically said that if they didn't win the case, he was on the hook to pay for all the services and legal fees, and if they won and their legal fees exceeded the settlement, he was also on the hook to pay the difference. Story 21. Recently, I just started a new job, and the employment agreement said I wasn't eligible for overtime, but it was something I 100% confirmed I was eligible for, and it was in my job offer letter. I pointed it out on the spot, and HR crossed it out and initiated it. She claimed she must have grabbed the wrong agreement by mistake. I hope there wasn't anything else in the agreement that didn't pertain to me. It did have a forced arbitration clause that I'm still unhappy about, but this job is just a stepping stone for me. Story 22. When we were young, my friend signed for a pre-owned Audi and came over to my house, said it was like $300-ish a month, and in his glove box, I read the paperwork and told him, "You know this says $550 a month, right?" He was clueless, but thankfully it was over a weekend, so Monday morning he went back and caused a scene to give the car back without penalty. You can almost get a new one for that much a month. Story 23. There's this website where everything is free, just pay shipping. All high-end looking crap. I went to the terms and conditions and read it. No matter how much you put in your cart, they pick one item at random, and that's what you get. They also can't guarantee that what the picture shows is what it is. They can also decide not to send you anything. I noped right out. If it's too good to be true, it is. Sounds like Wish. Story 24. When I tried to save 15% by switching to the Lizards insurance company, they had me on the phone for over an hour. Figures changed so many times, and they convinced me I was saving. I agreed to switch, received an email almost immediately with everything I needed to do to make it official. I reviewed the numbers once again. My Good Neighbors insurance beat them solidly. I canceled all changes. I should have listened a little more closely. Story 25. I got a job offer from a company that I had never heard of, but had a decent salary. I was reading the contract, and if I ended up quitting before my 2-year anniversary of the company, I would need to pay them back for every cent I earned and pay them a fee for the training they would give me. I am so glad that I looked more into that contract other than the salary. Story 26. I paid a lawyer to draw up a contract to make an offer on a house. Dumb butt forgot to change some information from the last contract he printed out and gave me one with an offering price almost $60,000 more than what the seller and I had agreed upon. Yeah, he'd have paid for that, not you. They have insurance for frick-ups like that. Story 27. Had a non-compete in a radio contract that said I would have to sit out 90 days if I left for any reason. Wouldn't sign it until it was revised to be non-compete only if I quit. When they asked why, I told them if I sucked so bad that they fired me, wouldn't it be to their advantage to have me work for their competition? They had no answer for that. Story 28. A program that my son is a part of for deaf and hard of hearing puts on field trips every now and then. We are down with our kid going on field trips, but the waiver that you have to sign states that the program is not responsible for any harm that comes to the child, even if they're found negligent. Depending on where you are, that might not be legally binding. Story 29. That my kindergartner could be questioned by the police without the presence of or notification of parent or guardian. Katy Independent School District Handbook. While the ISD is correct, minors still have Miranda rights. I would tell your kids to talk to an officer after they have spoken to you first. Minors still have every right to not have to talk to the police. Same as you and me. Story 30. Herbalife. I didn't look at the contract because there wasn't one. As soon as the phone interview got to, now canvassing is not the easiest part, but if you have others in your downline, that helps. I hung up. They desperately called back for 2 days until I finally told them to F themselves. Good job dodging a pyramid scheme. Most people that do MLMs lose money. Story 31. Quite a while ago, I bought an extended warranty for something from Walmart. When I got home, I found out they put in an act of God clause that basically made sure they'd never have to pay up. LMAO, what? Is that like we are not liable for any damage caused by the act of God, where the act of God is defined as literally anything ever? Story 32. I had a job with a crappy salary, so I searched for a new job, got an interview, phone interview, no, in real life interview. Later I got the contract that I was required to sign. It was a bunch of papers to read through, and somewhere in the contract, it said something along these lines. Before you start working, you need to pay us a fee of $5,000 that you will get back over time. Story 33. My work right now is trying to make us not take our 10 o'clock break and just work through it. A few months ago, I signed a contract that said I get a break every 2 hours. They haven't made me sign any new contracts, so whenever they tell me to work through a break, I ignore them, as I keep copies of everything I sign. Story 34. Whenever I sign liability waivers, like say for a 5K race or a boat tour, I glance through and cross out all the parts that say that I won't hold them responsible for negligence. The person taking the waiver either never notices or never cares. I've done that too, although I have no idea if it's legally binding once I do it. Story 35. Workplace changed their contract when I renewed. Original IP clause was, we own what you make on our premises or on our equipment, no matter when or why you do it. I'm paraphrasing. New one was, we own what you make, no matter when, where, why, or on whose equipment you make it. Yeah, nah. Story 36. When I was going to buy the Sprint iPhone 4S, it said, if phone gets lost, the client shall have to pay Sprint $100 to replace the SIM card and $399, which is overpriced, for a replacement 64-gig iPhone with order and shipment fees. I am glad I didn't buy it. Story 37. Got a check in the mail for $1,000. It said, just deposit into your bank account and pay for school supplies. On the back it said I would need to pay $1,450 back over the course of 10 months. $1,450 later for $1,000 today? No thank you. I went to first grade. Story 38. I once had to sign a contract for a job saying if I met anyone famous, I couldn't write about them. I met David Gilmour. Joke's on them, cause your girl has like 6 fanfics on him that I've been writing since I was 13. But I lied and said I wouldn't. He hasn't sued me yet, so... Story 39. Once got an offer to live close to campus, but not too close, right after turning 21. Was about to sign and noticed a clause that said no alcoholic drinks on the premises. So I could get hammered down the street, but not drink there? No thanks. Story 40. Negotiated a house rental contract to keep rent fixed for 3 years with no increase. While reading the fine print, I found out that they sneaked in a penalty clause of 9 months' rent if I decide to leave before the 3 years were up. Story 41. I closed on a house and saw the interest rate was listed as 7.5%. It was supposed to be 4%. My lawyer said, oh, that's just a typo. Go ahead and sign now, and we'll correct it next week. Nope. Story 42. Was preparing to make an offer on a condo. Buried in the document containing their HOA rules and fees was a cute little sentence saying that dues were going to nearly triple in 2 years. Nope. Story 43. Looking for a rental suite in Vancouver, the landlord wanted me to be responsible for insuring his place in case of natural disaster or damage to property from pipe bursts and appliance failure. What the F? Story 44. My HR told me that I did not get paid for jury duty. I talked to my dad and took his advice to review my contract. I replied to HR with a screenshot of my contract saying I get paid. Story 45. My employers tried to get all of us to sign a non-compete that geographically encompassed the entire globe, as well as any profession even closely related. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.